Today I'm going to tell you about election. An election is a formal group decision-making process by which a population chooses an individual to hold public office. Elections were used as early in history as ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and throughout the medieval period to select rulers, such as the Holy Roman Emperor and the popes. In Vedic period of India, the Rajas of a Gana, which is a tribal organization, was apparently elected by the Gana. The Raja belonged to the noble Kshatriya Varna, which is a warrior class, and was typically a son of the previous Raja. However, the Gana members had the final say in his elections. Even during the Sangam period, people elected their representatives by casting their votes in the ballot boxes. Usually a pot was tied by a rope and sealed. After the election, the votes were taken and counted. Back when the U.S. government was first formed, only white men over the age of 21 were allowed to vote. This was changed over the years to include everyone, regardless of race or gender. Today, anyone who is a citizen and over the age of 18 can vote. Elections can be complicated things, especially when you are talking about a nationwide election like the president. Candidates have large teams of people working for them who try to convince voters to vote for them. They use statistics and polls to determine what people like and try to say and do the right thing to get elected. Candidates run ads on TV, hand out buttons, give speeches, and have debates to let people know why they will be the best person for the job. Each state has a certain number of delegates in the Electoral College based on the population of the state. During the election, when one person wins the popular vote in a state, then they win all the electoral votes for that state. The exception being Nebraska and Maine, who apply electoral votes per each congressional district. Once all the votes are in, if one candidate has a majority of electoral votes, then they win the election and become president. The question of who may vote is a central issue in elections. Electorate does not generally include the entire population. For example, many countries prohibit those who are under the age of majority from voting. All jurisdictions require a minimum age for voting. In Australia, Aboriginal people were not given the right to vote until 1962. And in 2010, the federal government removed the rights of prisoners serving for 3 years or more to vote, a large proportion of which Aboriginal Australians. Suffrage is typically only for citizens of the country, though further limits may be imposed. However, in the European Union, one can vote in municipal elections. If one lives in the municipality and is an EU citizen, the nationality of the country of residence is not required. Electoral systems are the detailed constitutional arrangements and voting systems that convert the vote into a political decision. The first step is to tally the votes, for which various vote counting systems and ballot types are used. Voting systems then determine the result on the basis of the tally. Most systems can be categorized as either proportional or majoritarian. Among the former are party-list proportional representatives and additional member system. Among the latter are first past the post-electoral system, relative majority, and absolute majority. Many countries have growing electoral reform movements, which advocate systems such as approval voting, single transferable vote, instant runoff voting, or a concordant method. These methods are also gaining popularity for lesser elections in some countries, where more important elections still use more traditional counting methods. The presidential election process follows a typical cycle. Spring of the year before an election, candidates announce their intentions to run. Summer of the year before an election, though spring of the election year. Primary and caucus debates take place January to June of election year. States and parties hold primaries and caucuses July to early September. Parties hold nominating conventions to choose their candidates. September and October, candidates participate in presidential debates. Early November is election day. December, electors cast their votes in the Electoral College. Early January of the next calendar year, Congress counts the electoral votes, and January 20th is Inauguration Day. U.S. constitutional requirements for presidential candidates. The president must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, be at least 35 years old, have been a resident of the United States for 14 years. When elections are called, politicians and their supporters attempt to influence policy by competing directly for the votes of constituents in what are called campaigns. Supporters for a campaign can be either formally organized or loosely affiliated, and frequently utilize campaign advertising. It is common for political scientists to attempt to predict elections via political forecasting methods. The most expensive election campaign including $7 billion was spent on the United States presidential election in 2012, and is followed by the $5 billion spent on the Indian general election in 2014. A sham election or show election is an election that is held purely for show, that is, without any significant political choice or real impact on results of election. Show elections are a common event in dictatorial regimes that feel the need to feign their appearance of public legitimacy. Published results usually show nearly 100% voter turnout and high support, close to 100% in many cases for the prescribed candidate, or for the referendum choice that favors the political party in power. Dictatorial regimes can also organize show elections with results simulating those that might be achieved in democratic countries. In all states, the governor is elected by the people in a statewide election. Once a governor's term has expired, he or she has to run for re-election and will sometimes face opponents from his or her own party. That election is called a primary. People from all backgrounds can choose to run for governor, but the strongest contenders are usually those with previous political experience. In the recent governor's race primary in Texas, the candidates included the current governor, a U.S. senator, and the former mayor of Houston. Candidates travel all over the state to spread their message, speak to voters, and raise campaign money. Many private citizens also run, but since the cost to run a campaign is so high, it's usually reserved for people with lots of money and connections. To be eligible to register to vote, you must be a citizen of the United States of America, be a legal resident of Florida, be a legal resident of the country in which you seek to be registered, be at least 16 years old to pre-register or at least 18 years old to register and vote, not be a person who has been abdicated, mentally incapacitated with respect to voting in Florida or any other state without having the right to vote restored. And it's a third-degree felony to submit false information. Maximum penalties are $5,000 and or 5 years in prison. The deadline to register for an upcoming election is 29 days before that election. You can update your registration record at any time. However, since Florida is a closed primary election state, a party change for a primary election must be made by the registration deadline for that election. If the deadline has passed, you can still submit an online application at any time, and it will be processed for future elections. To submit an online application, you will need your Florida driver's license or Florida identification card issued by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. To protect your identity, you will also need the issue date of your Florida driver's license or Florida ID card and the last 4 digits of your social security number. Thanks for watching this Adventurous Kids episode.